Welcome to the director's chair portion of Video Stores Rejects. I am your host, Cody House, and with me is the returning guest, Kevin Pauley. He's here with me to discuss the films of Ron Howard, and today we are discussing a comedy smash, and was such a smash that Katzenberg at Disney didn't want to greenlight The Little Mermaid because of how popular this movie was. He felt like it was too soon to make another mermaid movie, and that is the 1984 comedy Splash.
And I got to tell you, I rewatched it again last night to prepare for this. And it's funny, when you're older and can look back on it, the film is so much funnier than I remember it ever being. Like it is a genuinely funny film. There's jokes as a kid I never got. Today, that film is even funnier to me than it ever was when I was a kid watching it on HBO.
Yeah, so my first question is what are your thoughts on Ron Howard as a director? I know he's not particularly a director people like want to explore his filmography because he's kind of what you would call a journeyman director. He's not really like, there's not really a distinctive style or like, oh, that's a Ron Howard movie when you're watching it. Though it looks like early in his career he did a lot of comedies and then he's kind of made a lot of dad movies.
Yeah. It's one of those movies that, like, to me, I think I'll say this for Ron Howard, and I actually mean this as a compliment, is Ron Howard doesn't seem to get in the way of himself. Like, he just tells the story simply. He's not trying to go for, go over the top or anything. He had his Academy Award film, I think, with Apollo 13, but in general, especially in his early work, he was just a very competent filmmaker. I think a lot of it, with his background being from television, I think a lot of that carries over to his early filmography, where it's just about getting the shot, get the shot you need. We're not worried about, is it super artistic? Do I need to do like a dolly shot here or whatever? It's just get the shot that you need. That being said, I will say the action sequence towards the end of the film with all the military guys is actually, as I was watching, I remember thinking, damn, this is actually like pretty fun. Like, this is really well done. And again, I've always got an idea of the geography of what's going on in the chase. And to me, there are plenty of top-notch directors who don't get that part right. He gets it right just fine there. But I think for me, he is a serviceable director. He's never going to be at the top of someone's list of best directors of all time. Not a chance. He's not a Scorsese. He's not, a Hitchcock. He's not a Kubrick, or a Truffaut. But he is an excellent, just get the job done filmmaker. And that's all Splash needed. It's all Night Shift needed. And those two films back to back show me the guy's got genuine chops when it comes to directing comedy. He gets out of the way of his actors. He gets out of the way of the story and just tells what he needs to tell.
Yeah, and this is, Night Shift was it was a movie he was going to make to have Henry Winkler as the star's buddy from Happy Days, but ended up launching Michael Keaton as a movie star. And this movie, is this Tom Hanks's first starring role? Because I know he'd been in movies before this, but I don't think he had been the lead before, unless we're going to count Mazes and Monsters.
I was going to say, I think, and okay, I'm gonna look this up because it's funny. I remember him from Bosom Buddies before I remember. Yeah, Bosom Buddies was 80 to 82, so he was a leading man on Bosom Buddies. And that's where I had known him from. So when I first saw Splash, I just remember thinking, hey, it's that guy from Bosom Buddies, which I loved that show. So I was very excited. Now, this was, for me, my first exposure to John Candy. And Candy, watching this movie again, because you got to remember, this is 1983. As a kid, I wasn't watching SCTV. I didn't have access to it. So this was the first thing I ever really saw him in. And I loved him as a kid. And watching it now, it's amazing to me. Like, he is the funniest thing in Splash to me. He is absolutely fantastic in every scene that he's in. And I love everything about Freddie. He as a kid, he was my favorite character. Watching it again last night, he's my favorite character.
Yeah. And, that's a role that could have not been as good as it was depending on the actor, because it's just like the loud, horny older brother, which, finding out this is a Disney movie kind of is shocking now You know, it's like this is
Yes, and I watched it on Disney Plus last night, which was hilarious to me to be doing that.
yeah, and but at this point in Disney's history, like their animation studio was not doing well, and this was something when Katzenberg and Eisner, I think, came in, they were focusing more on these live action movies.
Well, and I think too, you look at with Splash, it's one of the first films under their Touchstone Pictures label, so it's not a Disney film, even though it's under the same umbrella. But Touchstone was a big like arm for Disney in the 80s in particular. There were a lot of great films that had the Touchstone label on it. And so that was a big help for them, because then they could kind of do things that were a little more, risque, a little more a little less family friendly, a little more, they take a few more chances under a different studio name, but it's still under the same house. So yeah, there's a lot of things about Splash that, like, if that film doesn't work, if it doesn't become a hit, it makes me wonder, like, what happens to the career of Tom Hanks? What happens to the career of Ron Howard and Daryl Hannah? Like, where do things go from there if this film isn't the hit that it is? But luckily it was, and it's something that it's a perfectly done film. I mean, is it the greatest movie ever made? No. Is it the funniest movie ever made? No. But I'll say it's probably the best mermaid movie ever made, and I think it's a really cute, really funny, and really sincere film. I love the movie. It also was my first introduction to Eugene Levy as well. So a lot of big firsts for me out of this movie. And it played on HBO all the time, and I watched it. I mean, God, every time I could watch it, I watched it.
Oh yeah, well you mentioned where Tom Hanks, Ron Howard, and Daryl Hannah's career, but I'm looking at John Candy's filmography, because before this, it's all supporting parts,
Yep.
and I mean a lot of iconic movies, but they're supporting roles, and
Yes.
but his career gets a big boost after Splash as well.
Yes, it does, because he really, and again, I think, ask anybody about the film if they've watched it recently, he really is, to me, like the first thing I'll think of, because John Candy, in every scene that he is in, he just commands your attention. I mean, he's effortlessly funny. The racquetball sequence with his cigarette and his cooler of beers, like, it's a simple scene, but oh my God, like, it's so great. And I do wonder, I was watching, it's like, how many takes did it get for John Candy to hit that ball and hit himself in the head? I just wonder how many takes that took, because that is one of the funniest, like, shots. Like, John Candy sells that moment so perfectly. Like, goodness gracious.
I think I read they did it in one take.
Beautiful. That's even better if it's a one take shot, and it's like the perfect one take. You take that, you look at it, you're like, done, cut, we're out. This is as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah, and yeah, I had seen this.
Where every character works in this movie, even background characters. Like, I had forgotten, the character that makes me laugh the hardest in that movie is the damn secretary who got struck by lightning. Like, oh my God, like, everything with her is so funny. Like, it's just simple little lines, like, your father called, like, our father passed away 5 years ago. Would you like me to get him on the phone? Her showing up to work with her bra outside of her shirt, like, it's all those little things. And they didn't have to happen. That character doesn't even have to exist, but she does, and the movie is better for it. It's all those little things like that. The two idiots that work for Eugene Levy, they're hilarious. Like, it's all those little pieces that Ron Howard is able to juggle it all, and even a background character gets a chance to shine. Hell, even his brother Clint shows up to the wedding and gets chewed out by Tom Hanks, but you remember it and you can tell it's Clint, and it's really funny. So it's those subtle little things that Ron Howard does so well in this movie, and again, credit to the screenwriters as well, Babalu Mandel and Lowell Gans. Like, those guys have been doing it for so long, and their names are synonymous with so many different comedies in the late 70s and early 80s, and this movie just continues that trend. It's amazing to me, like, the stuff with the mermaid is like the least interesting stuff in the film to me. It's all the character development around that makes the film so rewatchable to me.
I would agree. I would agree that it's the acting. I think just that she happens to be a mermaid is just,
I
you
love
know.
Madison. Like, I love how genuinely sincere Daryl Hannah plays her. Like, she is such a lovable character, and just so I appreciate the wide-eyed way she approaches everything like a kid, the way she learns English from television and all the different ways that she speaks, like from learning things from television. Like the fact she gets in the fountain with the mermaid on it because they were going to get rid of it. Like it's just all those sweet little moments that she has with him. And she's so genuine. Like you absolutely know she's such a pure, sweet being. And it's so funny. Like you love Madison just for that. Like you feel bad when everything happens to her at the end of the movie. You genuinely do because you've cared about her so much up to that point. And Daryl Hannah sells that very, very well. And Tom Hanks, I mean, really, Tom Hanks is just so perfect in this role. Like he's the perfect everyman in any of the comedies he did in the 80s. He's the perfect like everyman. He's just so effortless. And again, it's his reaction to things. His reaction to the secretary it's priceless. Like it's just those little moments that he's just able to throw in a look, a look with his eyes, just the way he'll deliver a line that's just genuinely funny. Tom Hanks is just, this was a really big move for him, but it's funny when you look at it, he's just so effortless in the role. I mean, it's just really well done, and you can't imagine anybody else playing the part.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the actors who were bigger name actors at the time than Tom Hanks, because even though this helps launch his career, it's another decade or 8 years before he becomes what we know Tom Hanks today as.
Yes. Really, it was Philadelphia that really took that step up for him, really.
Mm-hmm. But here's some of the other people they were considering: Jeff Bridges, Chevy Chase, Richard Gere.
Would be a little too snarky for it.
Dudley Moore,
Michael
Keaton, which I think he would have been better as the older brother if they couldn't have gotten John Candy.
Honestly, yeah, if they would have just gotten Michael Keaton in that role, it would have been just as great. I mean, John Candy is still fantastic, but Michael Keaton would have brought that night shift energy to that part. It would have almost been the same role, honestly. Like it really would have been.
Kevin Kline, Bill Murray, also maybe a little too snarky, and at this point he wanted to do more serious films. And John Travolta.
John Travolta could have maybe worked, but I mean, really, Hanks is perfect. Like,
I think it's his everyman quality. I think that's what it is about him. Is that like there's a reason why people call him America's dad now, because he's got that approach that not many other actors have.
You can also watch the movie and you totally get why Madison would be in love with Alan. Like you totally get it. Alan's a likable guy. He's a good person. He's funny. He's looking for that connection to have with someone. And I think, it's one of those things where you like the coupling and you want to see that coupling happen. It's why the ending works, because you care so much about the two of them together. If you don't have that, this film falls apart really quick. But you do have that because Tom Hanks is such a likable human being. It's totally understandable why this gorgeous mermaid would fall in love with him. And it's totally understandable why he would fall in love with her. And it's not because of her just gorgeous. It's just who she is. It's who she is as a well, to use the loosely, as a human. It's who she is as a person, that's what he connects with. I mean, just one of those movies where, and I'm not always big on romantic comedies, but this one really works because it's not just romantic. It's really heavy on the comedy. Madison is funny. Tom Hanks is funny. Like Alan's funny. Freddie is the funniest thing in the movie. All the background characters at where they work at the vegetable place are all great. Like everybody, Eugene Levy is fantastic in it. Like everybody works. And it's just a movie that you can watch and every scene is interesting because of who's in it. And that's really saying a lot. But you've got two SCTV alums there. You got Tom
with Hanks, Candy and Levy.
Yeah, like Candy and Levy. You've got Tom Hanks coming right off Bosom Buddies, which he did a great job on that show. You've got Daryl Hannah, who just come off of Blade Runner and really just goes all in on the part. And the other thing, I was talking to my partner about it last night, and she was watching with me, and she's like, "God, I used to love this movie as a kid." And what we were really talking about that's also awesome, and again, just as a little bit off topic, but the practical effects work on her tail, like wow, that stuff looks great. And it would all be CGI today, but it's all real. It's in camera. The shot where she's sitting in the bathtub and the camera pans down her legs and you see like the vacuum form of like the scales forming on her legs. Like, that's a brilliant shot. That's a great shot. And it's all done in camera. It's all done practically. And, you know, that stuff, again, that stuff has to work too. You have to sell that illusion. And everything works on that level too. Again, going off on a tangent on the special effects, but that tail work, the makeup effects, the use of it's fantastic. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and the whole underwater sequence at the end, like
yeah,
it would all be CGI, so it's kind of amazing what they were able to do with probably a limited budget, because this is one of Touchstone's first movies. And
it didn't have a huge budget, no.
And he's not worked because none of these people were like huge celebrities yet. Like I guess you know, Candy was sort of known, but he hadn't starred as a main person in a film yet. And I don't even know what Levy did besides SCTV at this point in his career.
I have no clue at that point. And again, that's the great thing about this was like, it's you know, everybody works in those parts because they weren't stars. They were just actors you may have seen. It's why the Marvel Cinematic Universe works so well in those first, you know, several films, because they cast actors to play those characters, not stars. And a lot of times when you cast a star, that's all you can really see is that star in that part. And it's not the case with Splash. It's very much not that case at all. They're very believable in the parts they play. You don't think about them being stars. I mean, obviously now looking back, you know that they are more popular and stuff. But even as a kid, I never thought about it as Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. That was Alan and that was Madison, and that's just how I viewed it. You know, and that's what you want a film to do for you.
Absolutely, and I think why the romance works, not just because they have good chemistry, but because, like you said, they're both like genuinely nice human beings.
You really want them to be together. Like, you're sad when they capture Madison. Like, you're sad when all that happens. You're sad when Alan can't be with her. You know, like, you genuinely feel for them, and they are likable. There's not one thing about them that's you know, unlikable or false. They're played very genuinely, and you know, you get mad at Alan when he starts going off on her about her secret, you know, and won't let it go, you know, and he kind of chases her off, and you feel for him because he's just trying to figure it out. He just wants to have that connection. And he doesn't want anything to interfere with it. He doesn't want to have any secrets. He just wants to put it all out there, put his heart on the line. So you get where he's coming from. And it's so great when she comes back to him. And, you know, I love the fact that had Eugene Levy's character not gotten her wet, like, she was going to give up being a mermaid to be with him. That's a really big deal. You know, like, that's a really big deal.
And I do like sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say
that they're both just that she's willing to do that for him, and then in the end, he's willing to do that for her. That's genuine love. It really is.
Yeah, I like that twist at the end because, you know, I didn't see this when it came out because it came out a year before I was born, and it's not one. And it's not one I saw as a kid. I saw it later because I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of this movie. I should watch it. But like seeing it after I've seen The Little Mermaid, I'm like, oh, he goes to live with her instead of the mermaid like sacrificing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's funny
when you're watching the sequence of Madison and the ship and stuff. I'm like, you cannot tell me that the people who worked on The Little Mermaid were not inspired by Splash. The boat, the maps, all that stuff. Like, dude, if she'd have picked up a fork, that's all it would have been. Like, it's to me, you can't tell me they didn't take inspiration from Splash. And if you're going to take inspiration from something, that's a great thing to take it from. But you can't tell me that the people in Little Mermaid did not take inspiration from Splash. I'm just putting.
Well, that's why Ariel was a redhead in the original animated film, was because I think they wanted to make her a blonde, and then they're like, well, Splash, she's blonde. We gotta, because Katzenberg was still like worried people were gonna be fresh in Splash mode, so they changed her to redhead.
5 years old, I think, by the time Little Mermaid came out. So I mean, he wasn't wrong. It wasn't that far removed, and it was a big hit thanks to cable and VHS. It was still in rotation, so he actually had a point. I'll give him that. He actually had a point.
Yeah, and it's crazy who else was apparently auditioned for Madison. You have Tatum O'Neal, Michelle
Oh, wow.
Pfeiffer,
Yeah.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, when I guess she's just getting off Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Melanie Griffith, PJ Souls, Diane Lane, Kathleen Turner, and Sharon Stone.
Oh, wow. A very young Sharon Stone at that, man.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I don't know. There's something about Daryl Hannah. She just, I don't know. Like she just looks like she could be otherworldly. You know what I mean? Like even in Blade Runner, she looks like she could be a replicant. She looks like she could be an android. And in Splash, she looks like she could be a mermaid. She has a very, I don't know, an exotic kind of look to her. Oh, it's not super like, it's not crazy exotic. There's just something about her structure and the way she smiles and everything. She could be like a sprite or a nymph or a forest elf or something. Like she should have been that, like at some point, you know, like she just looks like she could be that kind of creature or that kind of character.
I think that they made the right choice for the reasons you have said for Hanks and Hannah for what the characters they're playing, because some of these other actresses would have been great, but maybe they wouldn't have quite had the same demeanor. Like I feel like Sharon Stone and Kathleen Turner, they're a little too, and it could be just from what we associate their performances with, but they might be a little too femme fatale for Madison.
Yeah, it'd be weird. It'd be weird hearing Kathleen Turner's voice deliver those lines because she has that very smoky, sultry voice. And it just would be odd to think of Madison's innocent dialogue coming out with that raspy, gorgeous voice of Kathleen Turner's. I mean, God, it is a beautiful voice. Like, wow. But it'd be so weird hearing that dialogue coming out of with that voice, I think. I'm not saying she would have been good from an acting standpoint, but vocally, the vocal quality would have been very different. It'd have been a very different take on Madison.
Mm-hmm. And talking about the background characters in this, Ron Howard's dad has a good bit too, because he's the guy yelling at Tom Hanks about his cherries at the beginning of the movie.
Yes, those cherries. And he's like, "How about I give you bananas at cost? It's a deal." Well, and Lowell Gantz, the screenwriter, is the guy that's doing the tour at the Statue of Liberty with the whole
right.
Ball. That's him. That's one of your screenwriters right there. I'm like, that's great. Like it's a line I remember. I will still to this day, like at some point, just go bocce balls because of that line. It's just funny. You remember it. You know what I mean? Like you remember it.
I think the other writer has a cameo in it as well.
I think he does, and I can't remember what I saw that he did, but he does have a background part. Can we?
He plays the man at the ice skating place that tackles Tom Hanks when he tries to go after.
Like we're trying to get the skates off of him. Yeah, okay, that's great. What a wonderful little part for him. Can we just say though, like, can we talk about what might be the funniest thing in the movie to me? I had completely forgotten that this was in there. But so help me God, the introduction of Freddie with his whole thing of like, I did it. I got published. They put my letter in Penthouse. And he's bought multiple stacks of Penthouse to give out over a letter. I mean, I laughed for like 5 minutes after that scene. It's so funny to me that he's so proud that he got a letter in Penthouse's forum. Like he's just handing them out like he just won a Pulitzer Prize, man. That slayed me. I had completely forgotten about that. And it might be my favorite joke in the whole movie. I swear to God.
Well, and you find out he hasn't changed since he was like a 10-year-old boy because he's doing the same thing at the wedding he was doing at the boat.
If it works, I don't change it. Like, it's just, oh God. I mean, what an introduction. John Candy in that Trans Am knocks into all that fruit. Who put all this? Why is this here? I'm okay, by the way. Like, it's John Candy doing that makes it work. Like, those lines are funny, but they're hilarious coming out of John Candy because he plays it so straight, So straight. And that's what's so great. He's almost the Johnny LaRue character from SCTV. If he was a little more normal in life, that's what he would be. He's the womanizing idiot, basically. It's great. I mean, there's a lot of Johnny LaRue in Freddy. Like, there really, really is. But, oh, my God in heaven, like, that whole introduction of Freddy is still, like, the funniest thing. Like, then him making fun of the secretary for getting struck by lightning. He's like, "Well, what's she doing? You know, she's got an appointment. Oh, she's going to charge up a car battery." Like, it shouldn't work, but it does because John Candy sells it so beautifully. Like, I mean, there are other actors, yes, you could have put in that part, but no one would have brought to it what John Candy brought to it. I looked at my partner after that opening sequence and I was like, man, I miss John Candy so much. I genuinely adored John Candy and I miss him so much. He should still be with us, still making movies. And Splash is one of those movies that just reminds you of how he could take even the smallest thing and make it his own and make it a line that you would remember or something that would make you laugh harder than anything else in the movie. That's a genuine talent that not everybody has. And, you know, the two of them work together on Volunteers, which is a good movie. It's not great, but it's good. But the two of them should have done more films together, period. I would watch Tom Hanks and John Candy in anything. Like, honestly, I would watch them in anything. It would just be great.
Well, I think what makes it work because of Candy as a performer, because like Hanks, he has this lovable quality to him. Because if you cast somebody else, it probably would come off too sleazy or too gross or like, whereas he is all those things, but because it's John Candy, you're like, oh,
yeah,
you know, like you give him a pass.
You rascal, you rapscallion, you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's also funny, like when the two of them are supposed to be the Swedish doctors. Yeah, you sure, yeah. And they actually subtitle it, like it's actually on there. But when he's like, "How did you do that?" He's like, "I have a 12-inch penis," and he's like, "Well, you know, you watch enough of these Swedish erotic films, you watch them like 500 times, the stuff just starts to sink in, man." Like, of course, that's how he learned Swedish. Like, of course, that's how he learned.
And just a bit of business with those military guys, like, because he's like, well, I'm part Swedish, and he starts speaking Swedish. And then the other guy where he's like, I'm not supposed to, you know, like,
right. Like he's about getting his face melted off by the lasers that the mermaid shot out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's again, background characters that shouldn't be remembered, but they're very memorable. And it's those things, man. I'm telling you, that's where Ron Howard, I think, does a really good job of balancing all that. Now, granted, a lot of that's in the screenplay too, but you have to balance it to where you can let those little moments happen, where you can let them breathe a little bit, where you can let those people shine. And I think, again, Ron Howard's background in television, especially doing sitcoms, definitely helps him make those scenes land. Like, again, there's not a single joke in that movie. Really, to me, there's not a joke that doesn't work. I mean, even background dialogue, it works. And that's not an easy feat. And it's easy in comedy for things to get looked over because of the bigger, broader laughs. But man, some of the broadest laughs in this movie are from these background characters and these small little scenes that happen that probably wouldn't happen now, but they happen and they're great. Like, it's really good stuff, man. Splash is one of those movies, like, I hadn't watched it. I mean, it's probably been over a decade. And I was so, like, enraptured with it immediately again. Like, I just couldn't stop smiling. It's just one of those movies that makes you so happy. And I get why it was a huge hit. I get why it was so big on cable and VHS and why, you know, people still talk about it. I mean, if you grew up with this movie, it's in some way, shape, or form, like, it is a really good movie to revisit. And it's genuine. It's heartwarming. It's also not schmaltzy. It's not like saccharine. The humor, some of it, again, I'd forgotten about the penthouse joke. Like, that's not a Disney joke. You know, that's a joke that the Swedish erotica, that doesn't happen in a Disney film, but it happens in this movie. And it's those jokes where I mean, if that film were made today, it's PG-13. Let's be honest. It's not PG. It's PG-13.
Totally. But, you know, this is, because I don't know when this came out in 80. Is it 83? I thought it was 84. But it. I don't know if
Splash is
it comes
84. It is 84.
if it comes out before Temple of the Doom and
Oh, it is 84. No, you're right. It is 84, but it was earlier in the year, I think, because Temple of Doom and Gremlins are the reason we got PG-13. So
yeah, and isn't that why Red Dawn ended up getting a PG-13 rating?
yes, before it was even released, yeah, because it was the first movie to be released with a PG-13 rating. Like that was the big thing about Red Dawn. Oh, it's the first PG-13 movie. So we're all thinking, oh god, we got to see it. It's got to be the most grotesque, like awesome thing. It's got to be like a Jason film. It's not, but it's awesome. It is a great movie, but it's not what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. But
yeah, Splash today would be a PG-13 easy, like easy. But it's again, there's still like a wholesomeness to it that even as a kid, like my parents never had a problem with me watching Splash. Like there's nothing unsavory. I mean, there's some booty shots and that's fine, but it's
right, like that wouldn't be in the movie if it was remade today. It would not be in there.
No, it would not. No, it would not.
They would cover it up even in a PG-13 movie. They would.
Well, it's funny because on Disney Plus they edited one scene digitally. It's the scene
right.
of the first season on the beach, and they add more hair. But I'm like, but they don't do it in the very next shot at the Statue of Liberty where her ass is right in front of the camera. Like it is right there, dude. They framed it on it basically, and that scene doesn't get edited. Like what? it's just such a weird. It's an odd hill to die on. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, they've done some weird things.
It bothers me though to have people like have companies like editing films like that. Like that's not what was originally made. That's not how it was made. And just for film preservation, you shouldn't be altering it. Like that's not cool. I don't like that at all. And I'm not saying, oh, I just needed to see her butt. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that shouldn't have happened. It was done without anybody knowing. And it's not cool. They're doing it to other movies, and it's not cool, man.
Play it and it's not the filmmaker's choice that's being done. And also Disney Plus, you have made it to where more mature content can be on your service. So
yeah,
don't even worry about it. Because I mean, when I talk to people from Canada or England, and they're like, because they don't have Hulu over there, so all their Hulu stuff is on Disney Plus or Disney. They call it something else. And like, so, because I remember someone was telling me I watched The Last Duel on Disney. I'm like, what? because it was a Fox movie, and of course Disney owns Fox now. But I'm like, so yeah, Disney, just you own the stuff. Just if you don't want little kids watch, I don't know how many little kids are going to be watching Splash anyways. But if
you I was a little kid watching Splash, so I'm gonna put that out there, sir. I was.
But you were an '80s kid. That's a different era. You know that as well as I do. Like
that's fair. No, that's true. Yeah, we got away with a lot more in the early '80s. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's been since.
What's that?
I was gonna say it's been since the internet has been like easily accessed for people that people have gotten more restrictive on what kids are exposed to.
And understandably so on the internet. Like I totally get that. But like back in the day of cable, like you knew if it was on during the day, like it's not going to have like violence. It's not going to have F-bombs and things like that. It's just, you might have the occasional butt or side boob that you could get away with in PG films back in the day. But that's the extent of what was going to be on. Like during the day in the summertime in '84, you know, I'm watching like The Last Starfighter and Conan the Destroyer, not Conan the Barbarian, because that was rated R, be on late at night. But Conan the Destroyer was on all the time. I watched it, and you know, like the joke was HBO, hey, Beastmaster's on. I watched the Beastmaster, God knows how many times. There's bare butt in that. There's it's there. It's but you know, again, it's not why I was watching it. I was watching it for, you know, a black tiger attacking dudes and a guy that could control a hawk with his mind and stuff. Like that's what I was, and Kodo and Podo the ferrets. That's what I was in for. I didn't care about Tawny Katane and her wiliness, although years later I would, but I didn't back then. It wasn't what was important.
Oh, I mean, all the James Bond movies up to License to Kill were PG. So
yeah.
Oh, it's just a different era, and you know, talking about how Ron Howard is as a director and his background in television, I think that's also why he doesn't Not that that necessarily means, because I know a lot of actors turn directors apparently become like control freaks even when they're not directing. But I think him working on such pivotal TV shows like Andy Griffith and Happy Days, he became a person that's like, I'm not more important in the work. This is a group. This is a group participation,
Yeah,
and we all have to work together to get this made.
and I
And I
think like
gotta,
you can look at like even like Arrested Development. He's happy to not only produce it, but he does the narration for it. He's never seen until
mm-hmm.
the Netflix seasons, but he's never even seen it until the very very end, and he had no trouble doing it, and he's very much a part of it. He's always struck me as someone that if you were to run into him like somewhere, he'd be very kind to you and would be cool to talk to. Like he wouldn't be a standoffish prick. I think he'd be very very kind. I mean, he definitely has that Hollywood dad kind of vibe to me as well.
Oh, totally, totally. And now his daughter is directing, because
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
directed several episodes of The Mandalorian.
Mandalorian, yeah, apple didn't fall far from the tree, and she's done a great job in her own right. But Ron Howard, I mean, like I said, he's never going to be remembered as like the visionary director of any sort. But he's always been just a damn good, like you said, a journeyman. He is a utility player. You know what I mean? Like he's not the best batter on the team, but he gets the job done when you need to get a run in. You know what I mean? Like he's that guy. And there's something to be said about being a steady Eddie, about being reliable. That they know you can get the job done. And look at the whole debacle with Solo. Everything.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why he was hired.
Yeah, because he's a journeyman. He gets it done, and he did. And I know it's unpopular belief, but Solo is my favorite of the Star Wars films made by Disney. I don't even think it's even close. It's by far my favorite because it feels the most like an old school Star Wars film. And a lot of that is Ron Howard.
I mean, there's a part of me that wants to know what the Lord and Miller version of that movie is. And there are some jokes left over that is totally Lord and Miller, like the whole thing where he fakes the grenade sound. I'm like, that's a Lord and Miller joke right there. But
that is.
But the movie is not as bad as people say it is, because the performances are great.
That they took it all out on Solo, and that's totally unfair. It's a fun movie. When I saw it in the theater, everyone in the theater was having a good time with it, man.
Well, I don't want to get on a Last Jedi debate, but I feel like a lot of people that complained about The Force Awakens being too much like the other Star Wars movies, then you're going to get mad when someone comes in and tries to do something different with it.
Yep, because there's no pleasing that fan base.
You're just never happy.
No, they're not. They're not. So, I used to be, more into that fan base, but in the years, like more recent years, I love the original trilogy. I love things about the prequel trilogy. I love things about the sequel trilogy, and I just kind of leave it at that. And then, I love Solo. I like Rogue One. Okay. I don't think it's the greatest film everybody thinks it is. It's visually pretty, but name me one character from that show who's not Andor. And before they made the Andor TV show, could you have named Andor? I couldn't.
I would have just told you the actor's name. Well, right. I know the droid. The droid's name is what? KT something.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't remember any of.
I would have been like Donnie Yen. I don't know what his name is. I'd have been like
right.
Donnie Yen. Donnie Yen's badass.
Right. Yeah, he's blind Jedi guy, like who's not a Jedi. Like you can't tell me any of their names because they don't really ever really take the time to get to know them. That's why that film doesn't work for me. But Solo, it does. It works for me. I know who Han is. I know who Chewbacca is. I know who Kira is. Like I'm like, all right, cool. Let's just roll with it. And again, Ron Howard able to take all the craziness of a Star Wars film and still keep it to what it's really about, which is the characters and relationships. That's to me what it's all about. And Splash, he does everything perfectly as far as like what he's asked to do. He doesn't get in the way of the story. And I think that's really important. And it's really important in comedy because with comedy, you've got to know how to build the joke, how to deliver the punchline, and how to not get in the way of it. And decades of TV work with the Andy Griffith Show and Happy Days, two of the most popular sitcoms of all time, that's the kind of stuff that you need for someone to direct a film like that. It's why Night Shift works, and it's why Splash works. And I think it's because of the fact that he has the background in comedy, TV and comedy writing, because he also, I think, wrote some episodes of Happy Days in the later time that he was there. So I mean, he's got that background, and that is something that you need for comedy. It's how you make a comedy work. And to me, you know, back-to-back films, Night Shift and Splash, dude, there are comedy directors out there now who would kill to have that back-to-back combo.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's rare this day and age. I mean, you got like the only three people I can think of, and they haven't, and they're like over a decade ago, is Adam McKay and Judd Apatow and Todd Phillips, which I'm not a big Todd Phillips guy, but
I like the first Hangover, but the other two didn't really do a whole lot for me. The first one, I think, is a classic film. It's funny in every way, shape, and form, and I love Old School. But those two are it for me. I hated the Joker. I hated Joker. I hate that film so much. It's beautifully acted. I hate that film. I don't know who it was made for. I don't know why they chose that story. It's an ugly, depressing, awful film, and it tries so hard to be the king of comedy and Taxi Driver that it doesn't have its own identity. So yeah, I got big problems with that movie. Joaquin Phoenix though deserved the Oscar. He's brilliant in the film. Brilliant. But that film for me was just like, no.
I think it's funny as he made a comment like, well, you can't be funny anymore in this woke era. I don't think he used the word woke, but he was basically saying something like, you can't be funny anymore. And Mark Maron, who's in the movie, who's in Joker, was like, well, maybe you're not just funny then, because that's part of your job as a comedian, is to adapt to the times you're in.
Yeah.
And adjust. Yeah. Because comedy does age, and there are things there are things that were funny 40 years ago that are not funny now, and we're gonna say the same thing. We
constantly talk about, dude, Blazing Saddles couldn't get made today. It couldn't. Like, that film couldn't get made. Blazing Saddles,
and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean,
it would be canceled before it came out.
It's just, that's part of evolving as a society, is going back and being like, oh, yeah, that's not cool. But you can still enjoy movies that are dated, just knowing that, like, okay, this was made at this time period, and what it was doing was very important, but I recognize that there are things in this movie that are not culturally appropriate.
Sure. I mean, I think the thing is, I think Mel Brooks always walked that fine line very well, because he was an equal opportunity hater, and that's why it works. Because no one was spared from Mel Brooks's wit. And because of that, that's why I've always thought his films have aged well for the most part. Blazing Saddles just had 0 Fs to give, and you had Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor writing that film, 2 of the funniest wits that will ever exist on this planet. And when they both literally had 0 Fs to give and could just go in and make the movie they wanted to make, you get the brilliance that is Blazing Saddles. And Blazing Saddles is a brilliant film. It genuinely is. It's why Young Frankenstein still works. It's why History of the World Part 1 still works. You've got to know how to balance it. And it's why, to me, going back to Splash, it's why Splash can hold up, because it does what it does really, really well. It never tries to go into the vulgar. Freddie is as vulgar as you get, and even he's not that vulgar. You can make jokes about Penthouse and Swedish erotica because you're not showing the stuff. It's insinuated. It exists, so it's okay to make a joke about it. It's not the entire crux of the character, and it's not the entire crux of the jokes of the film. That's why it works. You can have those little pockets here and there, and it's fine. But comedy is definitely subjective, and I think that's, you always risk that issue when you make a comedy, because it could be dated by the time the movie comes out. Case in point, look at all those abysmal, like, Meet the Spartans and the superhero movie and all that crap, where the jokes were already dated before the film even hit the theaters. Like, people were past jokes, man.
I think that's the difference between spoof and satire, right? It's
why Mel Brooks made brilliant satires, and why those films still hold up now. Because they didn't rely on, think about it. Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein are homages to Westerns and the Universal monster films. And those films were made decades before that film was made. So the great thing about Blazing Saddles is they can still make some social commentary that's modern, but it doesn't rely on jokes that you only get if you're alive at that time, that you only get it in that moment.
When you're
right?
referencing something that's culturally popular at the time it's being
Right.
made, I think that's why Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy works so well too, because
Yes.
they're not really spoofs on these genres. They're
No,
really
they're
homaging
satire
these genres.
and
Yeah.
homage. Yes, absolutely. And again, they're not made for the sake of like making fun of the genre that they're making a film about. They're paying homage to that genre, and that's why it works. And Splash, I mean, hell, Splash is almost a fairy tale. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
really, but it's a fairy tale for adults. That's not cynical. That's the great thing about Splash. It's never cynical. Like, it's not mean spirited, and it's not harsh to its characters for no reason at all. You don't have horrible things happen to the people just because it would be funny if. It's a legitimately cute film. It tells a really fun story that's really easy to get into and really easy to support. Characters that you root for, that you want to see succeed. They even give Eugene Levy a chance to, like, have that redemption for his character, at the end of the film, and it works. It works just fine. It's totally cool. And again, it's those happy little moments that you get, and you know that Alan will never see Freddie again, but you know that Freddie's going to be okay. He's going to take over the business, and Alan is going to be, a mermaid hanging out at this mermaid kingdom. Which I love that shot at the end where they pan over, the beautiful matte painting of like the kingdom. It kind of looks like the abyss, which I thought was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's all like glowing underwater. And it's funny, as a kid, I was like, I remembered that scene, but it's like I watched it in my teens or something, and for some reason that shot wasn't there. And I just remember thinking, like, but no, I thought they showed like a kingdom, like there was something to it. It didn't just end with them swimming off and there was nothing to it. Like, and it's so frustrating because I thought for years that wasn't there. So last night I'm like, man, I know there's an ending like that. I know that it shows up there. And I was so relieved when it pans over and there's the kingdom. I was like, yes, okay, I wasn't remembering that wrong. And it's not an ending that's not really quite a happy ending. No, it's totally happy ending. They got a whole kingdom to go live at. They're gonna be totally fine. It's gonna be great. So it's cool.
And before we finish, I do want to give Eugene Levy some credit, because if depending on the actor you hire for this role, it could have really gone off the rails, because he's almost in his own different movie,
Yes.
and he's
He is.
a little over the top compared to everybody else's performance, but because it's him,
right,
it works in the movie. But depending on another comedic actor, that could take you out of the movie.
Well, again, it's the smart things in the story structure. They take the time to have the scene where he goes to all of his colleagues and talks about mermaids being real, and you see how they absolutely lambast him. And he
Shred
knows
him.
what he saw. He knows what he saw was real. Like, he knows it's real. He saw her. He knows for a fact she exists. And it's that thing of, you totally get why he does what he does, because he's legit trying to prove to everyone he's not an idiot, that he's not making this up, and trying to basically save face in the scientific community where he's literally been laughed out of the room practically. So you totally get why he goes down the path that he goes down. But what I appreciate is the scientist who gave him the most flack is still a dick to him. And he realizes with that guy that, no, I've done the wrong thing. They're going about this completely wrong, and I've got to do something to make it right. And I appreciate that he actually is involved in the whole process to get Alan and Freddie in there and to get Madison out. Like, he totally is all in, even though he knows he'll lose his job. He knows he'll get reprimanded, but he knows it's the right thing to do at that point. And I really appreciate that they gave his character that chance to be redeemed. And a lesser film wouldn't do that. He would have just been a douche scientist and you hate him and that's it. Nothing else to it.
He wouldn't have had a character change. He would have just been over the top douchey scientist.
And I think one of the funniest scenes I've forgotten about is the whole thing at the dinner with the president, how he's got that water tank hooked up. And I'm like, oh my God, he looks like an assassin. And when he reaches in for the hose, and they're like, he's reaching in, go, go, go. They're like, taking it out.
Well, even the guy playing the president has a good joke. He's like, well, he just found out how much his dinner's going to cost.
Like, dude, what a great line. The president was on it. That dude was great. But it's like, it's such a funny scene. And again, you don't have to have that scene, but it's fantastic that it happens. Because it does lead, of course, to him getting the sprayer out in front of the place. But Oh my God, that scene is hilarious. Like him coming in with that broken arm and that giant tank underneath the jacket. Like,
Right, and the guy's like, "Why are you here? You shouldn't be working."
you shouldn't
He's
be
like,
here.
"Union sent me."
It's again, man, those little jokes like that don't have to happen. And in a lesser film, they don't, but they're there. And it just fleshes out the world of these characters so much. It's those background characters that when you have a film like that, like when you remember the background characters, then your director really did shit right. Because you obviously will remember the main characters. That's the whole point. But the fact you can even remember background characters like that, just simple little one-liners and stuff that are just really funny, like that's what I'm talking about. Like that's good writing, that's good directing, that's good structure of your jokes, and it's so important to have that. It's funny. I work with a lot of different writers and stuff, and one of the things we talk about is that writing a joke is very similar to writing a scare in a horror film. The build-up and the delivery. And I would like to see, like, it would be interesting to me if Ron Howard would ever go in and do like a genuine horror film, like take his background in comedy and his background in drama and really push in on like a psychological horror film. Like I feel like he could really deliver on that. Like I really do.
Yeah, I think the closest thing he's ever done that kind of ventures into that sort of genre is the Western he did with Cate Blanchett and Tommy Lee Jones, The Missing. It's got a little horror elements in it, but
I'd like to see him go all in on a horror film, like really make a classic horror film, like a 1970s era, like a Conjuring, like Exorcist kind of film, like really go in, or even a cool slasher film. I think he could deliver on that too. I really do.
Or just a psychological thriller. That would be cool. That's the genre he hasn't played in.
Yeah, something like what's the one with Harrison Ford? It's What Lies Beneath. That's it. What Lies Beneath. Something like that would be a good one for him. That would be a cool vehicle for him.
I remember when that movie first came out, I didn't care for it that much, but I recently rewatched it, and I'm like, well, this movie's kind of cool. Like, they don't make movies like this anymore.
No, it's actually, it's a solid flick. I mean, basically, like the films that Robert Zemeckis made, like Ron Howard could do a film like that, and I think something like What Lies Beneath would be a good one.
They're very similar. I guess Zemeckis is sort of considered more of an auteur, but I feel like he's kind of a journeyman himself. He's kind of dabbled in everything.
In the era of the CGI stuff that he's been doing, absolutely. But he definitely had really, you look in the 80s and you look at like Romancing the Stone and you look at Back to the Future. I mean, there's a difference there, man. He's got a real eye for what he's doing, and he really knows how to deliver the spectacle, and the intimate moments. And he does those both brilliantly with those two films. I mean, the whole Back to the Future trilogy is just littered with it. But you look at like Used Cars, and it very much has a similar vibe to like a Ron Howard comedy. Like those two things could exist in the same world. But I'd like to see Ron Howard do a horror film. I really would. I think that'd be an interesting pick for him. And I think it'd be something kind of cool to see him take on. I mean, he's older now, but that doesn't mean he still couldn't put out a really cool film. And I think something like that would be an interesting piece for him. Just to give it a shot. But I think if anybody can make it work, you have to know a comedy structure, I think, to really make that work. And he does. So
I think that's why Jordan Peele's so good at horror movies, because of his background in comedy.
Because of his background in comedy. He knows how to structure a joke. And if you can structure a joke, you can structure a scare. And it's all there, man. You've got to have that ability. But Ron Howard, I mean, he's never going to be probably someone's favorite director. He might make their favorite film, but he's probably going to be their favorite director. But he's a director who gets the job done, who's got a hell of a track record. I mean, hell, any director would love to have his track record of films and the actors he's worked with, the accolades he's been nominated for. I mean, the dude, Apollo 13 is a brilliant film, man. It's a really great film.
There's a lot of people that feel like Apollo 13 should have won the Oscar for Best Picture.
Yeah. Well, Cocoon is also a great movie. Shit, that's a wonderful film.
I mean, he does have some movies that are forgettable, but he also has a lot of really good, solid movies, and he's worked with pretty much everybody in Hollywood. And he, as
Yeah,
a journeyman director, you know who he is. If you're a film fan and you know directors' names, you know who Ron Howard is, even if,
absolutely. And if you're a
yeah.
pop culture nerd, if you grew up in the 70s, you know him from television before you even know him as a director. I mean, your first thing is going to be
Hmm.
Richie Cunningham or Opie. You know, it's where you are, man. You know, but you know, he's also great on those two things. Like as a child actor, Ron Howard in anything he was in was, I mean, The Music Man. Good lord, that kid, he's hanging with
What?
Robert
The
Preston and he's brilliant.
Shootist?
He's great.
The
The
Shootist?
Shootist, yeah,
He's
dude.
John
Come
Wayne.
on, man. Yeah. I mean, Ron Howard has paid his dues. I mean, he's earned all the accolades he has. And I think you can say he's done it the right way. I've never heard anyone speak ill of Ron Howard.
Hmm.
Never once, man. And that's like impossible in Hollywood. And yet,
Yeah, for as long as
I've
he's
never
been in
heard
the
that.
show business, yeah.
Never heard one unsavory or unkind thing about Ron Howard. He has always been referred to as just a total gentleman and just a really kind individual. And I'm really glad, you know, they always say never meet your heroes, but he's a person I would very much like to meet. I'd love to sit down and just have a beer and talk about the stuff he's done, man. I mean, like,
And
what a
he
cool life.
probably would. He probably would. He
Yeah,
probably
he
would
probably
sit
would.
down.
Yeah. He'd probably invite me over for a burger or something, you know, cook out on the grill, you know, champ, I got steaks, let's go, you know. But like, yeah, he just has that vibe. And you know, when you look at his career, I mean, God, he's been in front of the camera since he was like 5.
Hmm.
He's always been involved in Hollywood, and that's crazy talk when you think about how long he's been in there, man. Like, I mean, he's in his 70s. So, I mean, you're talking like 6 decades at least that he's been involved in pop culture. Like, that's nuts, man. Like, and to have the spotless record that he has, that's awesome. Like, good on Ron Howard, man. Seriously, good on Ron Howard.
He's doing fine, and he has a lot of good movies.
He does.
So,
And even the films of his that I'm not like crazy about, they're not bad films. They're just not maybe the greatest movies, but he's a competent filmmaker. I mean, he really is. Like, there's no question. He is a competent filmmaker. And there's no question, you know, that he does a good job. You know, like he really does.
he will shoot the movie on time, probably under budget, and
Yeah.
it'll
He
be
gets
a
it done.
competently made film. So,
And he directed Willow. Come on, man. He gave us Willow.
Yeah.
Willow is fantastic. I love Willow.
yeah, it's a very versatile filmography.
Yes.
You know,
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
There's
So
not a
he's
lot
one
of
of the biggest
directors
of
that
them.
can say that. Even some of our greatest directors can't say that because a lot of auteurs tend to stay in a certain genre that works for them.
Right. Hitchcock was all about thrillers. He never did like a big, huge comedy. He never did a musical. He never did like a, you know.
Well, the trouble with Harry is like his version of a comedy.
It's the closest. It's the closest.
Yeah.
But in general, Hitchcock was a thriller guy. And he did it better than anybody. I mean, just, yeah, no question why. But Ron Howard has done everything. Comedies, low budget, working with Roger Corman, like Grand Theft Auto and stuff. Like, you know, low budget to the highest budgets, you know, from Roger Corman, you know, to Academy Award nominated director. I mean, like that's,
well,
and, you know, all the Emmys and stuff through Andy Griffith and Happy Days. Like he's literally like, you know, like Johnny Cash saying, I've been everywhere, dude. Ron Howard can genuinely say that.
And he has one of the best Simpsons guest spots as himself.
Yes, he does. And I love that he's basically himself in Arrested Development. When they actually get to the point where they meet Ron Howard, he's really Ron Howard, but it's like a caricature of himself, and it's really great. Like he's great in every scene he's in.
Before we close, I will just say the other thing is a person who doesn't get enough praise. You just mentioned him, and that's Roger Corman. The man's responsible for some of the greatest directors' careers.
Dude, James Cameron and Ron Howard alone, like he's there. You know what I mean? Like you can't.
Jonathan Demme, Joe Johnston.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, so many people came out of the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking.
And we're all better for it. Corman is a genuine treasure. I mean, He's worthy of any honorary Oscar they would ever throw at the man. Like that dude, he's a big part of my childhood. The films I watched, the low budget films that you find like at the VHS store and stuff, like cool films like for me, like I always loved Galaxy of Terror. That's a genuinely creepy film, and it's a really great Alien clone, but it's a great standalone movie on its own. It's not just Alien. It capitalized on Alien, but it's not Alien. It's its own creepy thing. It's really good. I'm a big fan of Galaxy of Terror.
Well, do you have any final thoughts, Kevin, on Splash, or do you think we pretty much covered?
If you haven't watched it in a while, it is very much worth a revisit. If you're just wanting a movie that will just put you in a good mood, that you don't have to think hard about it, but it does reward you for paying attention. There are some really great little background jokes and things you could miss if you're not. But if you're looking for just a fun film, that you want a little bit of romance, you want a little bit of comedy, well, a lot of comedy, a little bit of romance with your comedy, it is a perfect little rom-com. I mean, they don't get much better. They really don't. It's got something for the romantic in you. It's got something for the person just wanting a fun, funny film to watch. If you love Tom Hanks, if you love John Candy, if you love Daryl Hannah, Eugene Levy, like watch this movie. It is so effortlessly fun. It's not a hard watch. The movie's like an hour and 40 minutes, if it's even that, and it flies by. It just flies by. To me, this is a great movie on a Saturday afternoon. It's a great movie on Valentine's night when you're looking for something to do with your date. It covers all those bases. It's incredibly fun. It's incredibly sweet. It's incredibly heartfelt, and it's still incredibly funny. I really would have to say this is very worth your time. Is it the greatest movie ever made? No. If you're on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, though, I put it probably at about a 4 stars out of 5 because it does deliver on what it's supposed to do. It put me in a good mood. It made me laugh, made me remember watching it as a kid. And, more importantly, it just reminded me of just the genius of young Tom Hanks in comedy and, of course, of John Candy and Eugene Levy. You just can't say enough about those two guys. And, of course, they would pair together in Armed and Dangerous, another film that I love from the 80s. They're just two people. I always enjoy them on screen. Tom Hanks, I always enjoyed on screen. It's a fun movie. To me, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a really cute, fun movie. It's very worth your time. Take the time and watch it. If you've never watched it, you're in for a real treat. If it's been a while, you're also in for a real treat because there's plenty of jokes you don't remember, and it's really, really fun.
Yeah, and if you've never seen it before and you wonder why was Tom Hanks in so many romantic comedies back in the day, it's because of this movie, because he is he may not be the typical leading man look for a romantic lead, but for a romantic comedy, he has that everyman quality that you can relate to and that you want him to find love and happiness.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It doesn't get much better. So as always, dude, thank you for the time. It's always a pleasure to get to talk with you guys. Again, it's wonderful to chat about, the filmography of Ron Howard. Again, like you said, it's very diverse filmography. Never going to be anybody's favorite director probably, but man, he's got some great films that I guarantee are some of your favorite films that you've watched. So there's a lot to be said for that. Thanks again for the time and allow me to be a part of what you guys do. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for making some time to talk about this movie. You have a great evening and enjoy your weekend.
I will do the same, and you too, sir. Have a great one.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.